On the 17th of June 2002, Warner Bros. Movie World opened a new flagship roller coaster, so groundbreaking and well received that it became an instant beloved classic, with many enthusiasts claiming it would change the trajectory of Movie World entirely.
It's definitely one of the park's most important rides.
It's what Movie World is about.
It brings me back to the first roller coasters I ever rode.
Just such an iconic, fun attraction.
I've been on it so many times I can't keep count.
Really cool, practical ghost train theming.
Really popular ride, and it's probably my favourite ride as well.
I just remember it being such a vibe.
It traumatized the hell out of me.
The ride was Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, one of Movie World's most iconic and popular rides to date. And in today's video, I'll be covering the entire history of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, the past, present, and future, covering the ups, downs, the highs and lows, the rise, the fall, the rebirth of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster. And to help, I've assembled my own mystery gang of incredible enthusiasts and content creators from Australia to help me uncover exactly what it is that makes this ride so influential, iconic, and memorable. So stick around because it's going to be a long video.
Come to Warner Bros. Movie World on the Gold Coast. Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Warner Brothers Movie World. Enter the Grand Archway, and you are there. It's a full day's entertainment at Australia's biggest and most spectacular theme park.
On September 9th, 2001, Movie World announced they were closing the Great Gremlin Adventure attraction. This attraction originally opened alongside Movie World in 1991, themed to the 1984 Gremlins film.
It was much more of a movie magic kind of park. There was the studio tour, there was, the special effects show, there was a lot more sort of movie themed stuff. And that's why I loved the Great Gremlins ride, because, it was tied more into the movie making.
You went through the movie cinema and the bloopers and the outtakes of really old movies. You went through to the ride itself of the Gremlins sort of taking over the back of house of a cinema of all the sort of storing facilities. I do remember that going on that attraction. They closed that and I was upset.
This ride to me, it scared the poop out of me. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear, so I'm going to substitute that in there. There are gremlins. There are gremlins in this theme park. Why is no one else concerned about this? I remember it also scaring my dad.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
I never got to experience this attraction, but it sounded absolutely amazing, and it looked like a lot of fun in the footage.
It was a lot more practical, it was sort of animatronics and whatnot, and that's what I really loved.
The ride also featured Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice.
It's showtime.
It's a shame they had to get rid of it, but after 10 years into its life cycle, the ride was encountering a number of technical issues, including the Gremlins animatronics malfunctioning due to exposure to water and lighting effects. The Gremlin animatronic's skin would literally melt and fall apart, being incredibly difficult to repair. This is a perfect example of life imitating art, especially given that in the Gremlins film that is the actual weakness of the Gremlins. And although it's a shame that the ride was experiencing malfunctions, I can't help laughing at this. I mean, can you imagine riding the attraction and coming across a freaky melted gremlin with animatronic eyes and wires hanging out? That would be terrifying. The attraction also had other issues, including ride vehicles crashing into each other, which damaged the frames. And the Gremlins film was also somewhat outdated at the time, which slightly affected popularity, as us Zoomer kids were a bit too young to even know what the Gremlins was. And despite the film continuing to be a classic to this day, at the time there were concerns that it had reached its sell-by date. The ride also featured a pre-show which looked incredibly intricate.
I enjoyed the pre-show, which was in one of these theatres, goofy outtakes from Warner Brothers films.
In the middle of the attraction, the gremlins attack and you get evacuated out.
Someone would run out whilst you were watching a little movie. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, the gremlins are here. You have to get on the ride and you have to escape. Or the gremlins.
And then guests would eventually leave the movie theater and enter the station where they would board the ride. Being a massive film buff, the idea of having an attraction like this themed to the behind-the-scenes studio experience is so cool and so creative.
Very similar to Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, just another vibe ride.
I wish I could travel back in time and experience it. But alas, every dog has its day, including Scooby-Doo.
Where are you? We got some work to do now.
Scooby-Doo was getting a new live-action film, which also happened to be being filmed right next door to Movie World at Village Roadshow Studios. It was divine intervention from Scooby-Doo himself, who was practically screaming, "Rah, roll, Raggy. We gotta ditch this Gremlins attraction and open a new roller coaster to capitalize on this amazing opportunity and maximize park attendance to increase profits, Raggy. The Gremlins attraction is falling apart and potentially facing irrelevancy, Raggy. The theme park industry, like any other commercial enterprise, is a battlefield, and future is determined on the ability to survive, adapt, and evolve. We need to pivot, Raggy. We need strategic adaptation and iterative development, Raggy. It's a fundamental pillar of sustaining a business and increasing profits, Raggy. This could be big, Raggy. It's a classic IP, Raggy. It could be a potentially timeless attraction with extremely improved throughput and capacity, Raggy. Not only that, it could also introduce a unique marketing opportunities to tie in with the new Scooby-Doo live-action film, Raggy. Scooby was absolutely spot on. The idea was brilliant, launching an attraction at the same time as a major blockbuster film next door to the same place that it was filmed. If it worked correctly, it would be a win-win for Movie World, Warner Bros. Pictures, and Village Roadshow Studios. It had all the right ingredients to be a big hit. Movie World could see an increase in park attendance and profits via ticket purchases and merchandise sales from potential fans of the film, and it would also drive people who hadn't seen the film yet to go and watch it in cinemas.
The theme for the ride, it's perfect. You know, the IP itself is a really, really good choice. Scooby has a place for all generations and everyone is really familiar with that IP.
Scooby-Doo is such an iconic show as a kid growing up and seeing Scooby-Doo and having watched those movies that came out, the live action one.
They're taking the movie and turning it into a ride. That was a big deal because the movie was a huge deal in Australia.
It would also make the Village Roadshow Studios an extremely attractive facility for potential future film productions looking to capitalize on branding and unique opportunities to tie in with future attractions and other promotions.
The credibility of our theme park here is the fact that we make this as part of the Movie World complex, and we're enticing a number of the major productions in here to make big movies. So it helps the theme park. People come in, even though they can't go and sit down and watch a movie being made, they know that the credibility of the park lies in the fact that Warner Brothers is a massive movie maker, has tremendous product, and boy, it's going to be fun.
It belongs at Movie World back when it was all about the movies. You're riding the movies. You're being a part of the action. They're putting you in the middle of this movie.
Disney did this. Disney took movies and turned them into rides. So this was like our own little piece of Disneyland. We were doing that here in Australia. That was something super exciting.
I can ride that ride that they went on in the movie, and to me that's really exciting.
But alongside any new opportunity, there is inevitably a number of challenges, obstacles, and pitfalls in the way.
One of the particular ones is a werewolf. That was me. Okay, you've got to get the facial expressions here. You ready?
The movie was releasing in June 2002, which meant that if Movie World aimed to open the ride alongside the film, they had a very narrow time frame of only 9 to 10 months to dismantle the Gremlins attraction and build the new Scooby-Doo attraction. Building something of a sufficient quality that fast is a Herculean feat. In many industries, there's a concept called the iron triangle, more commonly referred to as good, fast, and cheap. Basically, you can only choose two of these options. You can make something fast and cheap, but it won't be good. You can make something cheap and good, but it won't be fast. And finally, you can make something good and fast, but it won't be cheap, which is the precise problem that Movie World was setting themselves up for with their time frame. And Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster would cost approximately 13 million Australian dollars at the time, which adjusted to inflation would approximately be 24 million Australian dollars in 2025. On paper, the potential benefits from this new attraction were appealing, but on the other hand, it could backfire enormously. What if it didn't pay off? What if it was a Scooby-Doo disaster? What if the new Scooby-Doo live-action film was a complete flop, a laughingstock, and guests were not only not interested in an attraction based on it, but resentful and vengeful, taking their money to competitors who were more in tune with contemporary demands?
You're trying to make it look like I think
Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster
sucks.
All Fred Jones had to say was,
I think
Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster
sucks.
What if, despite the movie's potential success, the ride itself was not well received, with the main audience, children, potentially being intimidated and afraid of the roller coaster, which was either too thrilling or too scary? And worst of all, what if all of these scenarios came true? These thoughts are scary not only fiscally and financially, but also creatively. No one wants to set out to make something ambitious for it to flop or not land with the audience. These concerns could have serious implications for the park's image, branding, and status. It would be a terrifying gamble, but as the wise Scooby-Doo once said, "The future is uncertain and terrifying, Raggy. The path ahead, dark, mysterious, and dangerous. You mustn't allow yourself to become paralyzed and trapped by your own fear of failure. Nobody can truly know what lies ahead, but that's the risk one must pay in order to grow, to reach one's potential, Raggy. Moving forward is scary, Raggy, but it's also exciting and full of promise. Sometimes the next step forward is simply a leap of faith into the unknown, Raggy. The future is bright and beautiful, Raggy. We just need the courage to rise to the occasion." Movie World went ahead developing the concepts and teamed with German manufacturer Mack Rides.
Hey doll, you wanna dance?
Groovy!
The coaster type they decided on was a Wild Mouse layout, which was a great middle ground, offering slightly higher thrills while also being accessible for a wider demographic.
It's not as violent as say Lethal Weapon, which is an inverted looping coaster. Lethal Weapon appeals to about 25% of 13 up to about 25, whereas the more sedate coaster with a scary theme is far better for a market from those early years up to probably 50.
It's the classic Wild Mouse elements where you switch back and forth.
And the fun of going around the corners going, whoa, whoa, whoa.
It reminds me a lot of the first roller coasters I ever went on.
Mack Rides had built many Wild Mouse layouts in the past, but Movie World wanted something extraordinary and unique for the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster to set it apart from other attractions around the world.
And even though it's just a wild mouse, what they did to that wild mouse was next level and really, really exciting.
Incorporating world-class theming to immerse the ride in the world of the live-action film. Rather than following an off-the-shelf layout, Mack Rides set about developing a layout that incorporated both elements that Wild Mouse coasters are well known for, as well as dark ride elements and immersive theming and storytelling. The ride would be loosely based on the dark ride from the live-action film, which the public had yet to see, but hopefully would become iconic iconography with its evocative and atmospheric imagery.
You're riding the movie, you could watch the movie and go, hey, I went on that ride with those sort of elements of the moving knights of armor and the swinging blades and that type of thing from the movie. So that was really cool. Like, I'm actually in Scooby-Doo.
The dark ride itself was inspired by ghost trains and haunted house attractions, but elevated to a more impressive level.
Just the atmosphere of the attraction, the whole vibe around it, inspired by the old ghost trains that you would find around like Luna Park, and you would find at places like Knoebels in the US. These really ancient attractions that just have this charm about them.
Such a nostalgic feeling, and I still to this day remember our family going on it for the first time, and Mum just thought it was a ghost train because it's very well hidden from outside.
Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster would draw from this imagery while scaling it to a level that was realistically aligned with Movie World's budget and time frame. It was going to be an incredibly ambitious attraction, and if it paid off, it could be a huge success. It was definitely a huge gamble, but Movie World was putting all their cards on the table. Work quickly began clearing out the old Gremlins attraction of its theming, props, and ride materials in preparation for the new Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster attraction. Movie World made a really intelligent strategic decision with the new Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster attraction, reutilizing the large warehouse space that the Gremlins attraction occupied for the new Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster. This would hopefully save a significant amount of time in the development and construction process in order to reach the deadline in time.
I remember being very excited for it, wondering what it would be like. I remember during construction a cool moment was seeing one of the cars for the very first time through an open maintenance door. It was really exciting as a kid, and if that happened now, I'd be excited too. The family were very amused by my obsession with checking the ride's construction each visit.
Much of the old infrastructure was reused for Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, including utilizing the pre-existing theater rooms as staff training rooms and storage space. The other two theater rooms still exist adjacent to the queue area for Scooby-Doo. The old unloading station for Gremlins would also be used as an evacuation path for the new attraction. One of the police cars that existed in the Gremlins attraction was sold, and the other was later used in the new Superman Escape roller coaster. The old Gremlins entrance sign was actually covered up by the new Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster facade, which resembled a scaled-down spooky castle inspired by the dark ride in the film. To set the attraction apart from other typical Wild Mouse layouts, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster would feature an elaborate dark ride section before the Wild Mouse section began. During this section, a range of spooky and creepy animatronics would appear, such as Wolfman, Knights in Armor, and other creatures that Scooby-Doo fans would be familiar with.
Have you done anything cool and creepy lately?
This was a unique idea, but it did present an interesting challenge. How would they transition between the two sections? They could either go the typical route of having the train ascend a lift hill, but that ran run the risk of killing the momentum and immersion from the dark ride section, so they had to think creatively, which is how they landed on the solution for one of the ride's most iconic and unique moments, the elevator. The elevator alone is an interesting idea, but it's not exactly thrilling, and it could run the risk of being a potentially boring feature of the ride if they didn't do it correctly. So to put the icing on the cake, they created a tilting mechanism, so as the elevator rises to the next level, guests would be rocked from side to side, which gave the sensation of possibly slipping out of the elevator.
I'd never experienced an elevator going into, a wild mouse before.
And what I remember about the lift, I wasn't expecting it to turn side to side like it does. That really surprised me when it hit that.
It was definitely a very unique ride element that still set Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster apart to this date. It was a highly ambitious decision and something that set the ride apart from other attractions around the world, but it would put a lot of pressure onto the ride from an operational perspective. Movie World was really setting themselves a high bar with this attraction, which sometimes is exactly what you need to do to grow and reach your potential. It's easy to take the safe route and stick within the boundaries of what's commonly expected, to create something tried and tested that you already know works from a preset recipe. But sometimes playing it too safe only makes you blend in, getting lost in the noise, without any reason for people to take interest. Movie World was going big and bold with Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster. I really admire and respect that decision. Researching this video and seeing how innovative and risky they were actually going with this attraction is really inspiring from a creative perspective. And originally I had a fairly simple idea for this video. It gradually evolved over time, partly inspired by what I was reading and what I was learning about the attraction, and I wanted to make something bigger and more ambitious, just like Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster. A recurring theme of the development of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is that with every innovation comes a range of unexpected problems, and that's where creative problem solving comes into play, and the solutions that Movie World came up with for many of these problems that arose due to the innovation and bold risks are really interesting and kind of elevated the ride in a direction that maybe they didn't even plan originally. So now that they came up with this unique way of transporting guests up to the next level with the tilting and rocking elevator, they needed to work out a way to actually get them onto the coaster layout itself. This is a great example of the law of opposites. For every problem, there's an equal and opposite solution. And the solution they decided on is one of my favorite moments in the ride. The elevator reaches the next level and the guests are plunged directly into a backwards drop, which was a huge surprise element.
Nobody forgets that backwards drop the first time they ride on Scooby-Doo.
Didn't expect that going backwards.
First time being on an elevator in a ride, first time going backwards on a roller coaster as well.
And when you get up there, you kind of think, oh right, we're going to go forwards now.
Yeah, but you don't.
Yeah, you actually go backwards down there.
When you get to the top of that lift and it pushes you backwards, I can just remember my mum screaming.
There's like 23 feet of backwards, and that can freak a lot of people out.
Especially if they don't know about it in advance.
Knowing it's coming is okay, but if it's your first time or if you have never been on it before, like that freaks a lot of people out.
So you get to the top of the vertical lift, you then go down what is a pretty steep drop.
Extremely terrifying, but also really exciting.
It's always good to keep it a secret from everyone if they're going to ride for the first time.
Particularly in a time where, outside of a few niche theme park enthusiast forums, information about ride elements was somewhat sparse, so people wouldn't necessarily have any idea what was inside an attraction until they were actually riding it, especially when a ride is housed indoors. It's kind of like a Pandora's box effect. Guests probably would have relied on word of mouth, which gives the ride a sense of pathos and urban legend, which I think is part of what made it such a huge success to this date. Because you couldn't see the coaster from outside, you had to rely on what other people told you. And since it was in the dark, it was really hard to actually see how big these drops were, especially if the audience was kind of younger riders. They might have hyped it up to their friends and it sort of built up this like urban mythology about Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster.
I remember people from our small country town that I grew up in, like 4 hours away from Sydney, they were going off their head that they were going to Movie World and they were going to experience this, and I remember them getting back and they were raving about it. So I was always very excited to experience it.
Our first impressions of it, of the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, are vastly different from one another. I rode it as like a real little kid. I reckon I was probably like 5 or 6, and my dad took me on it. He promised me it wouldn't be super scary, but it traumatized the hell out of me. I was too young. And I loved rides, and I was a big coaster kid, but something about the theming just like really unsettled me, I think. It's so immersive. It's like, in terms of rides in Australia, it was well, certainly at the time, the most highly themed ride. Alana, on the other hand,
I never rode it as it was. I have watched many ride-through videos.
What do you mean as it was?
As it was before the re-theme.
I do remember, always wanting to go on it, but being very terrified of it at the same time. I had to rely on both my brother and my dad to give me a bit of a rundown of what to expect on the ride, because it's in a shed, you can't see much of it.
I was a little bit scared and apprehensive because I had no idea what was to come, but thankfully there were no loops or anything like that, and I had done roller coasters before, so it was not like a brand new experience.
I do remember shutting my eyes through the dark ride sequence, as I was a really scaredy cat kid back then who hated anything spooky. I'm still kind of like that to this day, as I hate ghost trains. I love the ride as a whole though, especially the coaster section as a budding coaster enthusiast.
I remember the animatronics really vividly though, like as a kid, that both impressed me and scared the shit out of me, especially the Scooby at the end. I really remember, that's stuck in my memory very vividly. And yeah, I came off the ride crying, but Dad bought me a little Scooby plushie from the exit store to cheer me up at the end. And we got to this is a funny story actually, we got to the hotel that we were staying at, and on the sign of the hotel door it said no dogs allowed, and I started crying again in the car because I thought I couldn't bring my little Scooby plush inside, which is very sweet.
It wasn't until I was a little bit older, after this attraction had actually opened, that I went on to ride it, and by that point this word of mouth had really built up, and I was aware of these elements, and combined with the actual thrill of the coaster itself, the idea of the thrill elevated it to something much larger and memorable than maybe other rides that you can see from the outside would be. So now that the guests had been plunged down this backwards drop, would they just go the rest of the ride backwards, or would it face forwards at some point? And this is the next interesting element that Movie World innovated with. They created a turntable system which reorientated the train to face forwards, which would then begin the Wild Mouse section.
For me, my favourite elements, besides the theming of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, was the Wild Mouse parts at the top.
But once again, the relentless innovation and out-of-the-box thinking presented yet another unique and possibly large obstacle. Movie World ran the risk of wielding a double-edged sword with this attraction. When you front-load an indoor attraction with impressive, high-quality immersive theming and unique out-of-the-box thinking, it's impossible not to build up some kind of expectation from the guest's perspective. And Movie World set the bar so high that if the rest of the ride didn't deliver on the expectations set by the first section, it would be a complete flop. Clearly, a lot of the budget of the attraction was spent on the front section of the ride, but the Wild Mouse section occupied probably the largest space in the attraction. And it was essentially just a big dark room, so Movie World once again needed to do something innovative and unique with the space to make sure that all the momentum and hype built up from the first half of the ride didn't completely disappear once the more thrilling sections actually started. So they innovated with unique laser elements and projections, which highlighted some of the coaster's twists, drops and turns, as well as complementing the new Scooby-Doo theme song which blasted throughout this section of the ride.
I just remember the soundtrack and the fun of going around the corners going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Because back when I first rode it, it was really dark in the room, the smoke, the lasers, couldn't really see what was going on.
And towards the end of the attraction, it also featured some fog effects, which really built up the spooky and creepy atmosphere. And last but not least, one thing I forgot to mention was that throughout the entire attraction, Scooby-Doo himself would frequently appear throughout the ride in animatronic form. Movie World had done basically everything they could do with the time and budget for this attraction. They didn't pull any punches, and they definitely innovated and pushed the boundaries of what was expected. But you can have all the right ingredients, you can hit the deadlines, you can put in the work. The one thing you can't guarantee or predict is how something will be received, and that's precisely the next obstacle that awaited Movie World. On the 15th of June 2002, Movie World held a special press day event where guests were invited to experience Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster a few days before the public, and the first impressions were incredibly positive. I actually dug through the Parks forum, which was one of the few niche coaster enthusiast forums based around Australian attractions at the time, and this is just a first-hand account of someone who actually got to experience the press day event. Yes, this relatively unawaited coaster has finally opened at Warner Brothers Movie World. I was given the chance to ride it last Saturday at a press event, and to be frank, it was the best ride I've ever been on. Just because it isn't a thrill ride doesn't mean it can't be good. At around 5.5 minutes, the ride has length, excellent theming, and some amazing effects that simply can't be beat. Kudos to Movie World for this fantastic ride.
So my earliest and fondest memory of Scooby-Doo is back in 2002 when it first opened. I was working at SeaWorld at the time. We ended up getting invited over to the Roxy Theatre here at Movie World for a movie preview, and they surprised us. They said, well, Scooby-Doo's about to open, we'd love all the staff to come over and have a ride on it before we go and see the movie. I remember all the theming on it was amazing, very, very impressed by that because it was just like the movie, which of course came out around the same time. It was also filmed in the studios next door. So that was really, really awesome.
If the early feedback was anything to judge this attraction by, Movie World had a massive hit on their hands, and 2 days later Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster officially opened to the public, alongside the Australian premiere of the live-action film, which took place at Movie World itself, which featured stars from the film, Linda Cardellini and Isla Fisher, who walks the red carpet, as well as Neil Fanning, the voice actor who played Scooby-Doo in the films, who actually worked at Movie World as an entertainer.
Movie World employee Neil Fanning loves this ride. And so he should, because he's the Aussie behind Scooby's voice in the box office blockbuster movie Scooby-Doo.
I started here in 1991 and in the street theatre performers, and also doing the acting roles in the Police Academy stunt show, and also was working in film and television as well, doing stunts, voices and acting.
Neil was called upon to do Scooby's voice during the filming of the Scooby movie, so the actors would have something to respond to. The producers liked it so much, he got the part.
The fact that both the coaster and the film premiered in Australia on the same day is nothing short of amazing. The idea of doing something like this is so ambitious, it's honestly daunting, and it's the kind of thing that many companies would shy away from because it's simply so risky. To top things off, both the ride and movie premiere took place during the school holidays, when the park's attendance was much higher than it usually would be. Everything worked out in Movie World's favour. The ride was extremely well received by the public, with people praising it as the best ride in Australia and placing it on the world stage of world-class attractions to compete with Disney and Universal and other high-quality immersive theme parks around the world.
It was awesome having a new family-friendly thrill coaster at the park, and it easily felt like it could be at a Disney park with how high-tech it all was at the time.
The live-action film also went on to be a huge success, grossing $275 million at the box office. Needless to say, the film's success and the fact that many scenes were shot at Village Roadshow Studios was a huge drawcard for the ride, and made it extremely marketable and iconic, bringing many fans to the park. Operations were running smoothly, and although the attraction was drawing large crowds, given the ride's high capacity, queue times weren't too long and the coaster became a massive people eater in the park.
I remember the castle. It was very hot when we were queuing up, so we were glad to be inside the castle.
Walking through that amazing facade into the spooky forecourt of that castle, where you had the big fountain in the middle, all lit up.
Suits of armour and little, torches and whatnot, and all the sort of the brickwork and theming of the castle. So that was really cool.
And then on top of that, you had the screens playing behind the scenes footage and behind the scenes interviews of the Scooby-Doo movie, because they filmed it there obviously at Movie World. So I do remember that, and then walking through and seeing the cars come through two at a time with no one in them ready to go.
I just remember being immersed in that, just the spooky vibe. There's no way to describe it.
And this was before I was really, all au fait with all different coaster models. So I think I'd maybe experienced a Wild Mouse at maybe like the Easter show back in the day. And so once we'd sort of gotten into the main section of the roller coaster, I was like, oh, I sort of recognize this kind of thing. But yeah, it was really well done. The lights, the music, so everything in the dark was really cool. And yeah, that really cool ghost train sort of spooky theming at the start was probably the best bit, I think.
So the main theming elements, just the Scooby-Doo dog throughout the ride, The swinging axes, obviously, the wolf that comes up, that prop that turns with you as you turn that U-turn. And always remember that, Scooby-Doo, where are you? I'm up here.
There's no way to describe it than Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is just a vibe ride. It's like the movie. The movie is a vibe movie. It's something that you just put on in the background and let your mind drift away. I find Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is the same.
And the finale, when you got to that final room with the Scooby-Doo animatronic, and there was a laser right in your face, so you had no idea you were about to do that really jarring drop, which is straight down to finish the ride. So all in all, the experience was just absolutely fantastic when I first rode it. I can't remember how old I was. I can't remember the time of the park when we visited to ride it, but I do know my sister and I absolutely loved the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster and still continue to love it to this day.
And the movie had just sort of come out earlier that year as well, so the fact that it was tied to a relatively recent IP, was just like, oh, that's cool. They're actually, investing in something that's, a recent movie. So that was kind of cool as well.
The Mystery Gang were also featured in the parade in an impressive float themed to the live-action film, which also gave Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster an even more prominent presence in the park. Guests exiting the ride would walk through a gift shop selling merchandise themed to Scooby-Doo, which I'm sure would have been extremely profitable given the massive throughput the ride brought to the park, as well as the success of the live-action film, which probably made the possibility of selling merchandise much higher. It was a masterclass in everything you could hope for with the opening of a new theme park attraction, and that's testament to the huge swings that Movie World took both from a thematic, immersive and ride experience perspective, but also in their lead up and marketing strategy. It's hard to say, but I don't think the ride would be so iconic if Movie World weren't so bold with the direction they took this attraction in. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster represents a period in Movie World's history where they were at their greatest, in my opinion, delivering high-quality, immersive rides that tied in thematically with the park's Hollywood on the Gold Coast theme. It's not the first time they'd successfully pulled off something like this either. In fact, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster actually followed the opening of Wild Wild West, the iconic log flume attraction, which is equally impressive. And after Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, Movie World also introduced a number of impressive attractions to tie in with movie releases, such as the Harry Potter walkthrough experience and the Matrix exhibition. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster held its place as one of the most iconic rides at Warner Bros. Movie World for a very long time. The ride's iconography and theming is etched firmly into my childhood memories, along with many other people who grew up at the same time. The ride aged incredibly well alongside the live-action film, with its endearing and over-the-top 2000s cheesiness, which gives the ride an unmistakable air of quirky nostalgia and affectionate, cringy 2000s-ness. It seemed like Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster was cemented firmly as a permanent fixture in the park's lineup of rides and attractions. They captured lightning in a bottle, and the only question was how long could they keep the spark alive?
Move on. So, well, I've got here Scooby-Doo, but there's really nothing to say. Scooby-Doo looks terrible at the moment.
In an ironic and unfortunate turn of events, the same reasons that led to the creation and success of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster also led to its eventual fall from grace. By 2015, just like Scooby-Doo's predecessor, the Gremlins attraction, Scooby-Doo was well into its life cycle and was beginning to show its age. Operations and effects weren't running as smoothly as they used to, animatronics would frequently appear not to be working, and in the main Wild Mouse room, the music was turned down and laser effects weren't as elaborate as they originally were when it opened. Many of the ride's iconic moments, such as the swinging axes as well, were often not working as intended. The ride lost its rewritability because the high-quality immersive elements were no longer reliable. The ride experience too was reportedly a lot rougher than it had been when it originally opened. There were rumours of a significant refurbishment and some much needed TLC as part of its annual maintenance, which was a welcome change. But in December 2016, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster reopened after a maintenance period, and guests were shocked to discover that the dark ride section of the coaster had been gutted of basically all of its theming.
For those who don't know, they've taken all the theming out from pretty much the station as you depart right up until the platform as you get off the exit platform.
We hope that they actually do something with it.
I was one of the how you would say fortunate, unfortunate people who got to experience Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster with no theming. I went on it with my now wife, but it just had no theming. It just wasn't there. It was really bizarre. I remember hyping up this attraction, then going on it, and like the queue and everything still had the theming, and then you went through the door and nothing was there.
So I rode it for the first time in 2017, right after they completely gutted it, and I had watched ride-through videos of it, and I was excited to see it, and then we got there and realized that it was just literally empty.
There was obviously the time where all of the theming was removed, and that was very shocking. I'm sure there was a valid reason for it, but that was probably the biggest quality decline that we saw.
I do remember riding when it was just a black box. The only effect working was the swinging blades, but it was all lit up. Nothing on the walls, there was no theming, it was just the soundtrack, no lights, no lasers, no smoke. It was so surreal riding it when it was just a big black box, and it was just the most weird sensation to be in that building, knowing what it was, and just riding this wild mouse. It was really bizarre.
They were just running it completely bare, like lights fully off.
So they took out all of
They took out almost everything. Like, there were a few bits and pieces, I think, but almost everything they took completely out.
Right.
They turned all the lights off, and then they had like the light show in the
That's right, like the laser stuff.
So they had like a laser show in this bit, Wild Mouse bit.
Yeah.
To top it all off, the air conditioning was frequently turned off as well, making the ride experience incredibly uncomfortable, particularly in the muggy and humid Queensland weather. Apparently the loss of theming was due to concerns over fire safety related to some of the thematic elements which contained flammable material, which could be extremely dangerous. I completely understand those concerns, and safety is absolutely the most important thing to take into account when you're running an attraction like this. But the fact that the ride reopened in this condition is absolutely shocking to me. It's a big red flag from a business perspective. Sure, I can understand that having the attraction closed during their busiest time of the year could put a lot of pressure on other areas of the park and ultimately lead to a lot of complaints. But allowing one of your signature attractions to open in a condition like this is really not a good look.
The biggest thing about it is that it's just no reference to Scooby-Doo.
Nothing making any reference to Scooby-Doo. Like, the Scooby-Doo voices were gone. Yeah, the Scooby-Doo voices were gone. The only sound bites that I heard were, you know, like the monster noises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
Imagine the guests who travelled from overstate and overseas, excited to check out Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, only to discover that the ride was a shadow of its former self. They did put up some small signs warning guests about the change in quality, but in my opinion the message on the signs was a massive understatement. Saying "excuse the mess" kind of underplays it a bit and implies maybe one or two effects weren't working, not that the entire dark ride section, which is arguably the highest quality part of the ride and the most iconic, had completely vanished. Given the lack of transparency and manageable expectations, the ride was still pulling large crowds, and queue times were reported at 2+ hours. The theming in the queue area remained, so there was nothing really to imply what was waiting for guests after they waited that massive period of time.
So the queue was themed, but then you would go in and it was empty. And I loved it anyway, because it was spooky to ride it in the dark and like have that little backwards drop bit and all of the cool stuff happening, the little elevator bit.
Yeah.
In the dark, it worked really well.
It's honestly really embarrassing hearing about the fact that this even happened, but I can understand from a business perspective. They probably found themselves between a rock and a hard place. If they kept the ride closed, people would complain about not being able to ride it, but if they opened it in the condition they did, guests would complain too about the drop in quality. It's kind of an impossible situation. My perspective is that if your business revolves around making memorable experiences, you probably want to make sure that those experiences are high quality memories, not riding through an embarrassing dark empty room with everything special about the ride stripped away. In January 2017, Movie World responded to a Facebook comment complaining about the condition of the ride. In Movie World's response, they say, "There are plans for thematic enhancements to be made at Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster. We started the enhancements to the attraction during the maintenance period. However, we wanted guests to be able to experience the attraction over the school holiday period, so it's currently open with reduced theming to the dark part of the ride." This opened up a lot of speculation about the future of the attraction, with many people predicting a complete retheme to a different IP. It seemed strange to strip out all of the dark ride theming and most of the Scooby-Doo storyline from the attraction. So a lot of people thought that they were actually going to maybe demolish the coaster and build something new there, such as something like Harry Potter or another Warner Brothers IP. The ride remained in this condition for the remainder of 2017, and when it came time for the ride's annual maintenance period in October, guests were excited, expecting the finishing touches for the long-awaited refurbishment to finally take place. But in November 2017, it became evident that this would not be the case, with the refurbishment taking place at a later date. In December 2017, the Parks Forum published an interview article with Clark Kirby, the Village Roadshow theme park CEO at the time, saying that the refurbishment would be taking place after the end of financial year, which means that it wouldn't be happening until June 2018. So Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster would have remained in this condition for almost a year and a half. But there was a silver lining. The refurbishments described by Clark Kirby painted the upgrades to Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster as a whole new ride experience with state-of-the-art technology such as projection mapping and some more really cool technology, which would build upon what made the ride so special and breathe new life into it. This was really exciting news which generated a lot of buzz, and by the sounds of it, Movie World was returning to their roots with what made Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster special in the first place by pushing the bounds of what was expected from rides at the time to a whole new level with state-of-the-art technology. It seemed like they were trying to think outside the box again and put a unique spin on the attraction.
For me, I'm thinking using this technology, I mean, the chance of them doing it right hopefully is quite high.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be absolutely amazing.
Well, the most we were hoping is that A, the ride wouldn't just close and have an empty building, which has happened before, and B, it would come back with the theming that was there already, that we'd see Scooby-Doo restored to its heyday. But if they're going to chuck in $1 million and make it even better, I mean, that's
absolutely.
the best you can get.
Oh, absolutely. So, I am so excited to see what happens. Hopefully we can find some details out before it reopens.
On July 22nd, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster closed for an extended period of time with an estimated reopening of November 5th, just before the school holidays began. Signs were placed outside the attraction teasing about thematic upgrades, and the facade received a fresh lick of paint, which improved the quality and appearance of the exterior of the attraction, which was starting to look a little bit worse for wear alongside the rest of the ride.
We're keeping a lot of the nostalgic elements that some of the original thematics that people loved about the ride that we had to get rid of. Obviously, a lot of that's coming in. We're trying to use a little bit of new technology with projection mapping, a few other bits and pieces, just to try and elevate the experience. But the ride itself it's been such a popular ride. And I think it's broken all our hearts to see it, essentially gone dark for the last couple of years. So we're really going to bring back a lot of those elements that people loved about it.
So let me ask you, those who are a fan of the original Scooby-Doo ride, are they going to get blown away by this next generation?
Absolutely. Yes, that's good to hear.
Work continued on the attraction, but information about what to expect from the upgrade was difficult to come by, except for a new name, and I was unable to find the exact date that Movie World revealed this name. They were calling it Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster Next Generation. Next Generation definitely sounded like it was in line with the high-quality upgrades being teased by Clark Kirby, and all kinds of speculation was thrown around by what the new version would look like. People remained optimistic, and as November approached, the hype was building. By the time November came around, there were some delays, and the eventual opening was pushed back to December 15th, and the public was extremely excited for the reopening of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster Next Generation.
Scooby-Doo Next Generation is going to be, and we can only have two answers here, so absolutely amazing or just as good as it was. So 67% of people said it's going to be absolutely amazing, 33% said just as good as it was.
Yeah, the Next Generation. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the opening day didn't quite go to plan. The ride was supposed to open at 10 AM, but guests lining up were told by staff members that it wouldn't be opening, and it was unclear when it actually would open. It wasn't until much later, towards lunchtime, that Next Generation finally opened to the public, many of whom who had attended the park just to ride the new attraction, and continued waiting around for updates, and when it finally did open, the experience wasn't well received.
Good old Scooby-Doo Next Generation. Did it live up to the hype for me? I don't think I had too much hype to begin with. I guess when there was no theme in, it can only go up from there. But I think something that Next Generation failed to capture was just the atmosphere.
No good. It's no good. That's all I can really say. Yeah, it was crappy.
Next Generation was not what it should have been and was not the best.
I like the idea behind it, but unfortunately it didn't quite execute probably to the level that they were expecting.
As you may have seen in my own video on the subject, I absolutely hated Next Generation. It wasn't very good, and it nearly ruined the ride for me with its awfully implemented changes.
The addition of new screen and projection elements unfortunately didn't live up to the expectations that people had in mind.
They took out all of this really cool, practical ghost train theming, with sort of spooky armor and everything, and cobwebs and whatnot, and they replaced it with bad projections. Like, the CGI was worse than a movie that was already years old by this point when they refurbished the ride.
People were expecting world-class upgrades, and many of the new effects barely even worked, with reports of the screens and projections bugging out and displaying error codes.
Look, I had really high hopes for Next Generation. Obviously, we've just come off the back of that period where the ride had all of its theming removed, and then it was announced that it was opening as Next Generation. I went there probably a year after it reopened with, again, really high hopes, but unfortunately by that point it was already starting to suffer from the screens and the projectors not working just as intended.
Even the quality of the projections, it was not even blended with any kind of theming like they would on other theme park rides. This was just against a blank wall. It was like Uncle Frank had set up the projector in the backyard to project against the garage with some DVD he'd pirated off the internet or something.
Like, obviously when the effects got out of sync, it made it really, really difficult to get that feeling of like the hitchhiking ghost right in Haunted Mansion when they ride along the Doom buggy with you, to get that idea of a monster on your car with you coming, or the linking up while you're going up the elevator while you're moving and getting that audio and that vision to link up.
Wrote it with the screens, the next gen theming, and hated it. I liked it better when it was empty, because I'm a huge fan of like animatronics. Like Splash Mountain is my favorite Disneyland ride. Like, I'm really into those kind of dark but well themed rides, and so I was really bummed. Like, the screens were so bright that you could see everything, like nothing was a surprise anymore because everything's just illuminated.
Movie World's Facebook page shared a post sharing the news of the opening of the new version of the ride, and the post has over 5,000 comments, many complaining about the changes being made to the attraction and the poorly thought out opening. Technical rehearsal signs were later put up, despite the fact that this was advertised as the official opening of the new Next Generation ride. So it's hard to blame guests for getting upset when they were under the impression that the ride would be in working condition, only to discover that it was apparently a technical rehearsal. Reading through Facebook comments, the reopening of the attraction was something that many people planned their visits around. Many of them previously experienced the ride in its bizarre, themeless, stripped out version, and it would be quite a letdown to once again experience the attraction in a subpar condition. It was a complete 180 from the original opening of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster in 2002, which was highly innovative and well thought out and executed. Where the original opening went to plan and was well received, Next Generation was the opposite. It was definitely better than the condition it had been in for the last 2 years, but that's a pretty low bar. Although there were many complaints, it was great to see the return of some of the physical set pieces, animatronics, and dark ride theming.
Now, I will say the fact that they put theming back in was definitely a good thing, and I think for a lot of people it would have been enough.
And they definitely did try to capture the original magic of the attraction and add some new interesting effects.
The disco room, as I think it's called, that was really cool. I really enjoyed that, but it was kind of the more screen effects that I think were a little bit lacking.
And rather than increasing the immersion, actually detracted from it, because often your attention would be drawn away from the practical set pieces and animatronics, and you would be focusing on the bizarre projections and screens that often didn't work.
You know, physical animatronics and props, when they stop working, they still serve as a piece of theming, whereas screens and projectors, when they're not working, they don't really serve as much of theming, unfortunately. Look at Wild West Falls, for example. It's had both times where everything's working and nothing's working, but it's still a really enjoyable ride experience because you still have those physical props.
It definitely wasn't a good start to the new version of the attraction, and many people complained that Movie World should have been prepared well in advance and done their testing prior to opening. but it seemed like history repeating itself again, and Movie World was rushing to get the attraction open for the school holidays. It is to be expected for there to be teething problems with an attraction when it's still in its testing period, but it's misleading and potentially false advertising to build the expectation that something is officially opening and will be in working condition, when in reality it's actually a technical rehearsal, and you're using the guests who paid to visit the park specifically to ride the attraction in its new condition as guinea pigs. I'm not sure if many of them would have made the trip out if they knew up front that it was a technical rehearsal and many of the effects wouldn't be working. At least they would have known that ahead of time.
It was just paled in comparison to what it was originally, and you think of people my age, sort of millennials, having kids now and taking them to Movie World. And they probably remember the original and sort of going, oh yeah, this is really cool, and then taking them on this really kind of not very good next generation experience and going, oh yeah, it's different to what it was when I first rode it.
So that's, I think, the ride felt off. Was it better than Big Black Box Building version? 100%. But yeah, it's sort of, for me, missed the mark a little bit, and probably not what they were expecting, because the ride holds such great nostalgia for so many people. For it to come back and probably not live up to those expectations.
Unfortunately, the inconsistency of the effects wasn't something that got ironed out over time, because it was very common throughout the life cycle of Next Generation for the effects to be hit or miss, and often not work at all. Many of the screens and projection effects would often be frozen or not turned on. The elevator screens were one of the most inconsistent effects. Sometimes the audio would play without the visuals, or vice versa, and sometimes the visuals would simply display a frozen image or just be turned off entirely. Another downgrade from the original version was the laser effects in the main Wild Mouse section. There were still some light effects, but they weren't as elaborate as the original version. And this was another thing that many people were disappointed about, because that was one of the most iconic parts of the actual Wild Mouse section of the coaster. And many people were expecting the effects to make a complete return to the original condition once the ride was refurbished.
The biggest effect, I think, was probably just the smoke and the lasers in the main room. Sort of probably not as smoky or hazy or as lasery as it first was, but that could all come down to being a safety issue as well. So that I don't really begrudge. It's just really hard when attractions obviously open with a certain level and then it sort of goes down over time. So I fully understand that, but it's an interesting one.
Overall, the ride's reception didn't live up to the hype of the original Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, which is a shame, especially for fans of the original version, because it holds such a special place in people's hearts. And I want to be clear that I'm not just complaining for the sake of complaining here. I'm not the kind of person to just trash something for the fun of it. I'm just sharing the actual history of this attraction, and I love Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, and I find this part of the history really sad. The ride was still definitely an enjoyable experience, but with the inconsistency of effects, it made it hard to get into it as much as when it was at its peak. At this point, content creators from overseas were able to visit the park and experience it, and it definitely, even in this condition, was still a very unique ride.
It's like we're actually going to see bits that we used in the film.
Can't wait.
It's the nostalgia, you know.
It is the nostalgia, 100%.
Some people watching this might be thinking, why is it such a big deal? But
it is a big deal.
You know, it came out when we were growing up. We absolutely loved it.
And
so
I cannot wait to see what it's like.
Honestly, we're really looking forward to it. So here we go, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, Next Generation. Well, there we go. We've just experienced the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster for the first time, and I tell you what, that did not disappoint.
I literally had a smile on my face the whole way around. I loved it.
It was really good getting on there. I loved it so much. It's really well themed. The audio's great. It really didn't disappoint.
Still goes to show that despite the condition of Next Generation, it was still an excellent attraction. It's just a shame that it wasn't as good as it used to be.
When you were somebody who had experienced the original and you had known the original for so long, it was jarring to experience. But I'm sure, especially since this is a family attraction, let's be real, they would get a kick out of this.
Next Generation remained open for 5 years and degraded in many ways over time. The effects remained inconsistent and operations slowed down as the ride aged. Ride breakdowns were far more frequent, and often the ride would close unexpectedly or have significant delays. Decay was also noticeable in the queue area, where graffiti and carvings in the wood in the hallway section became more and more common and were never repaired. It was a huge noticeable drop in quality, and the upkeep of these things made it clear that Movie World either wasn't in a position to give the care and attention Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster required, or they had some changes planned down the line, so repairing some of these issues was redundant, not worth the cost or effort. Maybe they plan to demolish it and build something new, so why would you repair something if you're just going to get rid of it anyway? The future of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster was more uncertain than ever, and with the ride being over 20 years old, it was unclear if it would even remain a staple of the park at all. In September 2022, the ride had to be evacuated after stopping due to an incident where a guest took off a piece of clothing that got caught on part of the ride, causing guests to be stuck on the attraction for an hour and a half. At the time, media and news outlets latched onto this with clickbait news articles stating that guests had to be rescued from a roller coaster incident, creating a narrative of something much worse, with the subtext that the ride was unsafe, unstable, and Movie World was somehow irresponsible.
Breaking news, 4 people have just been rescued from a roller coaster at Movie World.
4 people have been rescued from a ride at Movie World after their carriage became stuck 10 metres off the ground. Emergency crews raced to the scene when the Scooby-Doo coaster malfunctioned.
We do understand that this was not a mechanical fault. The reason for this shutdown was actually caused by somebody riding this roller coaster themselves, taking off an article of clothing. Obviously no one was injured, Jonathan, that is the good news, but we spoke to a few people that were inside, actually standing in the line to jump on this roller coaster. Have a listen. But an investigation, of course, has been launched to figure out how this all unfolded. The reason for this shutdown was actually caused by somebody riding this roller coaster themselves, taking off an article of clothing.
Another mystery, Alex, thank you.
When in reality it was due to a guest being stupid. However, the aging condition and decay of the ride, as well as the poor reception of Next Generation, and the potential of more sensationalized news reports creating a negative public image are, I'm sure, all aspects of what caused Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster Next Generation, unfortunately, to close for a very significant period of time in 2023. In early 2023, Movie World announced that Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster would be closing for a significant maintenance period. The ride would apparently be receiving a significant and exciting multi-million-dollar upgrade, with improvements and additions being made to the ride both from an operational perspective with changes to the track, the coaster trains, the brakes, as well as upgrades and changes to the theming and story. It was a very welcome and exciting announcement, and initially it was said that the ride would eventually be reopening again in late 2024. However, this date was later adjusted to late 2025, which was quite a controversial surprise at the time. Many people were confused. Why would the ride be closing for such a lengthy stretch of time? But overall, people were generally excited about the new upgrades and changes being teased for the attraction, hoping for a return to form and maybe going back to the classic roots of Movie World, grounded in more practical and immersive effects, without the reliance of screens and projections and other very cool technology. The inconsistency and unreliability of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster Next Generation also caused a lot of people who were visiting from overseas to be disappointed when they arrived and discovered that the ride was closed unexpectedly. I did reach out to Coaster Studios, who unfortunately didn't make it in time to experience Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster due to its unpredictability, and they were very kind to give me a response sharing their experience. In February 2023, we made our first ever visit to Australia and spent 3 days on the Gold Coast. Our first stop was Warner Brothers Movie World to experience the country's best roller coasters. Unfortunately, our visit to the park was poorly timed as they were in between investments, so only 3 coasters were open: DC Rivals, Green Lantern, and their Looney Tunes Kids Coaster. Well after our trip had already been planned out and paid for, the park announced that Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster would be closed for a 2-year refurbishment project, which would overlap with our planned visit. We were super bummed as the attraction was a top bucket list for us. The staff at Village Roadshow, I think, felt bad for us that we were traveling all the way from America and wouldn't get to do it, so they planned something special for us to feature it on the channel. We were given an exclusive walkthrough of the ride building, documenting the ride experience that was offered pre-makeover. It was an incredible experience that we will always remember, and we look forward to one day experiencing the attraction once it opens. The footage recorded by Coaster Studios is actually the last sort of public view inside Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster that we have, but the turbulent ups and downs of the attraction and its history left people with a really sour taste in their mouths, and ultimately many people were feeling less optimistic about the future of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster and Movie World as a whole. For the past couple of years, work has been quietly continuing on the attraction, and it's difficult to tell what's going on behind the scenes given that most of the ride is in the large warehouse space that we don't get to see when it's closed. In 2024, an article was published on Movie World's website giving an update and a brief behind the scenes look into what's happening. The article describes the changes as a retrofit, which sets up a more manageable expectation that it won't necessarily be an entire overhaul of the attraction, but more of a touch-up with some changes being made to some of, but not all of the elements. The ride will be receiving upgrades to the ride system, as well as new trains which will increase capacity, and a test seat will be installed at the entrance of the castle so guests can make sure they fit on the ride before queuing up. And the ride will also receive upgrades to the brake system, changing to magnetic brakes, which should hopefully give a smoother riding experience. There will also be changes and upgrades to some sections of the track, which hopefully will make the twists, turns and drops a bit smoother. As of this stage, there haven't been any more updates on the attraction, and visiting the park it's very difficult to tell what stage they're at with things, and whether or not it will open on time by the end of 2025 or not. I'm not sure how I feel. I'm mainly an optimistic person and usually look for and believe in the best in things and people, but given the track record of the attraction in the second half of its lifespan, it's very difficult for me to say what the future of the attraction holds. It definitely feels like a turning point, not only in Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster's history, but also in Warner Bros. Movie World's history as a whole. Over time, the park has gradually drifted away from its focus on capturing the feeling of movie magic, with the last remnants of their truly movie-based attractions, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster and Wild West Falls, rotting away quietly in the back end of the park, which feels more and more like a ghost town as the years go by, while the entrance of the park has been front-loaded with more DC superhero-centric Six Flags style attractions. There was a glimmer of hope when the new Wizard of Oz precinct was announced, which seemed like a return to form and celebration of the golden age of Hollywood with one of the most iconic films of all time. But when it opened, many people, myself included, felt that it didn't quite live up to its potential, and unfortunately many of the awkward moments from the Next Generation opening seemed to repeat themselves with this new edition. The lead up to the new precinct was mysterious, with little to no information, and it was unclear when it would actually be opening. In fact, the opening was only announced the night before it actually happened, and in a similar turn of events, guests later discovered that it was in fact a technical rehearsal despite being advertised as the grand opening, and it's clear that much of the area wasn't quite in a condition to be open yet, with lots of the theming being sort of hit or miss, with black fencing everywhere. So for these reasons, it's hard to say how the reopening of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster will go. As far as I can see, the fact they've basically advertised it as a retrofit rather than a complete overhaul or a complete new riding experience has set my expectations at a reasonable level. I'm not going to get my hopes up too high, but part of me still hopes that there's some more changes that shift the attraction back to its glory days.
Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster kind of came at a really interesting time in my life, going from being a teenager and a young adult and going into a more serious period of my life where I needed to start to consider, what am I going to do for the rest of that? And what am I going to do at university and that? And experiencing something like Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, its original iteration, it kind of said, this is something that you can do. This is something that is an option for you. You can make theme park attractions, or at least, I never went down that path. I didn't become a theme park designer, but I think it laid those foundations to say that, this is a serious industry. This is something that people do as a job, that adults and other people made this attraction, and that is something that you can be a part of. And it really got me excited about the future of Australian theme parks and just theme parks in general. I wanted to be more in that. This and Storm Coaster, they kind of laid the foundations for what would eventually build and build and build and become Review Time.
To me, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is not only a great attraction in its own right, but most importantly, it's the perfect representation of what made Movie World so special in the first place.
In the long run, I think if Movie World can return to more of that practical movie making magic kind of theming and, concept, I think that would be better for its longevity and for it to, remain something special in the hearts of, park goers.
I have faith in Movie World that it's going to be just as awesome, if not better, when it reopens soon. Hopefully shortly. I reckon probably Christmas, but we'll see. Hopefully earlier. Fingers crossed.
I really, really hope the ride is brought back to its former glory for the refurbishment. I'm not asking for much, I just, want it to be like what it was when it opened in 2002. It's definitely one of the park's most important rides, being very iconic, unique, and it really needs to be respected more by Movie World. I love it, boys will love it, and I want nothing but the best for it. Ruh-roh, Rocky. Here's hoping, Rocky, that it gets good.
I'm hoping that with the new version, they do go back to that more practical nature of Scooby-Doo. There's something about that original version that was so charming and so lovable, and I hope that they don't just go and add more screens and more visual effects, because honestly, one of those problems with screens is that the effects are going to be fairly outdated if they're not next level, or next generation, I guess, as it was called. But if they could go back to that original iteration and just introduce a lot more practical effects and a lot more of that ghost train charm, I reckon that would be chef's kiss.
It's just such an iconic ride for families and now for older people that grew up with Scooby-Doo, but also young kids now. I cannot wait to get over the Gold Coast later this year and try this Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, and hopefully it goes back closer to the original rather than the next generation.
For some reason, it is a really, really popular ride, and it's probably my favourite ride as well. I think if Movie World was to get rid of it, it would be a completely different park after that, and I'm so glad they made the decision to actually refurbish the ride and keep it around for longer.
So I'm really excited. I'm hoping that it, comes back to that really magical place where it's just immersive and believable. And
fingers crossed.
It's a great stepping coaster for a lot of kids. I can't wait to take my daughter on it for the first time, for her to experience the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see the return of physical sets, hopefully, to the ride. I'm looking forward to it returning to its former glory, I think, is what a lot of people are hoping for. Will it reach those levels of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster when it first opened? I'm not entirely sure, but I'm excited to see what the park does with it. And 100% it has a place. It's where it belongs, this sort of an attraction. It belongs at Movie World. Turning that corner and seeing that facade is super exciting, and cannot wait to turn that corner off of Main Street to see the facade, to see it finally open once again is going to be super, super exciting. So it is going to be great once it reopens. It's great for Movie World, and I can't wait to see what they have done with Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster 3.0. Time will tell.
When Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster originally opened, Movie World was taking big swings, punching well above their weight with bold, creative decisions, thinking outside the box, not only reaching their potential, but far beyond it, and truly innovating at a world-class level. It was a special place where people could escape reality for a while and immerse themselves in the worlds of their favourite films. It truly captured the magic of movies. Sure, some people might argue at the end of the day that it's just a theme park, it's not that serious, but for me, Movie World played a large part in shaping me as a person, helping me grow a deep and truly meaningful passion for films and storytelling. It was deeply influential and ultimately played a role in me eventually dreaming of making my own movies and telling my own stories.
Have a look at these faces in the crowd. One of these people may be the next Hitchcock or Spielberg.
And I'm just one individual at the park, and if Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster influenced me this way, I'm sure there's countless other people who have been influenced in countless other ways. After all, even when Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster was in its darkest days, literally, people still came to the park. They still paid hundreds of dollars for tickets. They still lined up for hours and hours and hours. And I don't think they would do that if they weren't expecting something special. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster was set to reopen in late 2025. But as the year progressed, it was difficult to tell if the ride would in fact open. The ride facade still sat dormant and seemingly unchanged, and since the rest of the ride was indoors, there wasn't anything people could do other than speculate. Some people even questioned whether the ride would reopen at all. But throughout the year, Movie World started releasing teasers for the new version of the attraction, including a teaser trailer which revealed the new logo and some promotional clips of how the ride might look.
The original spooks. The unforgettable thrills. Get ready! Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is coming soon to Warner Brothers Movie World.
The impression the teaser reveal made throughout the theme park enthusiast community was pretty fantastic. It looked like the ride was going to be a return to form, and much more in line with what made the original version special. The logo was closer to the original rather than the next generation version, and it also looked like there was going to be some kind of new color scheme and lighting. But still, there weren't any visible changes taking place on the ride facade, or anywhere that people could see in any significant way that revealed how close it was to actually opening. Movie World did also start revealing more teasers on their social media, such as a clip showing off some of the new merchandise, which also showed some of the queue area, which was very exciting. You couldn't see too much in the clip, but what was visible was very impressive and definitely in line with that spooky atmosphere that people knew and loved. Finally, in September 2025, Movie World revealed that Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster 3.0 would officially be opening in December 2025. Work began on the facade, and it seemed to be going at a pretty rapid pace. The facade received a fresh lick of paint, the queue got some new shading, and the old sign disappeared. Throughout October and November, Movie World continuously released a really fun range of teasers with the mystery gang themselves inside the ride queue area, which all seemed to hold hints for the actual opening date for the ride. Now, as an important aside, during this time, some changes were taking place at Movie World. The park seemed to take a complete 180-degree turn from their usual way of operating. Rather than keeping things mysterious and closer to their chests, the park started revealing a lot of exciting additions, such as the new Stars Terrace restaurant, as well as a new upcoming stunt show which would replace Hollywood Stunt Driver 2 that would also open in December. The atmosphere in the park was much more exciting than usual and also felt a lot more vibrant and hopeful. Everything was looking great, and it only went up from there. One morning I opened my emails and I was surprised to discover an invitation to a sneak peek preview of the new Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, which was an incredible surprise. Throughout December, Movie World continued teasing the opening and showing off parts of the queue and ride and sneak peek videos. One of the videos showed off a new screen added to the ride, which had people pretty split. It showed a larger screen with the Jester on a chandelier and the scene where Shaggy and Scooby are being trapped by the monstrous food. This raised a lot of red flags for some people, but I actually thought it looked a lot better integrated than the original next-gen screens, and I was excited to see how it would be integrated in real life. Suddenly, rumors started floating around about a potential soft opening, and lo and behold, it actually happened. Movie World seemingly had learned from their mistakes with the Wizard of Oz precinct opening and actually ran technical rehearsals on the ride for a few days before the official opening, which ironically took place before my sneak peek preview. So the day finally came where I was able to re-ride the attraction for the first time in years. We raced to the park hoping to catch the soft opening, and when we got there we were disappointed to discover that the ride was closed temporarily due to some technical issues. I felt pretty disappointed at first, but then I was sort of heartened because it showed that they were doing things the right way. They were placing the ride through technical testing period with actual guests and ironing out some of the operational aspects in time for the opening. We waited around for a while and thought about leaving and trying to come back some other time, but then the ride actually opened and we managed to get in the queue. It all happened in a blur and it was hard to take it all in at once, but my first impressions were through the roof. The queue area was fantastic and better than ever, with massive upgrades to the theming. The atmosphere was fantastic, and we moved through the queue really fast. Finally, we got to the station, and it all looked incredible. It was mostly the same with a few touch-ups, but that's basically what I expected, and I was just happy to be back in the spooky castle once again. There was the addition of a new locker system, which I'll come back to soon, but after we put away our belongings, we were finally on the ride. It was so exciting. We went through the iconic Jester doors into the dark ride section, which looked fantastic. All the theming and lighting was really good. There did seem to be a few effects that weren't fully working, but that was sort of to be expected given it was a technical rehearsal after all. And then we got to the first screen scene, which as I expected was actually pretty well done. I definitely would have preferred practical theming, but all things considered they did a pretty good job. The rest of the dark ride section was great, with the swinging axis and everything else. And then we got to the biggest mystery of the ride, the coaster section. It was pretty unclear what to expect from this area, but entering the lift was a promising sign because the infamous Scrappy-Doo screens had been removed, which made me sigh a breath of relief. The elevator started rising, which was super nostalgic, and they had put the original audio with the "Scooby-Doo, where are you?" And then we entered the coaster section. And it was pitch black. The entire coaster section was in the dark. That was honestly pretty disappointing, and the music wasn't very loud either. Going through the section in pitch black darkness was quite jarring, and made some of the turns and drops feel a bit more abrupt than I remembered, despite the fact that the ride was supposed to be a smoother experience. That could be to do with the fact that I couldn't really see what was coming up, so I couldn't anticipate the ride elements, so it felt surprisingly rough, which was kind of confusing. Finally, we got to the last showroom scene, which thankfully was a huge upgrade over the next-gen version. It was more like the original, although the screen was still there, but it was once again very much more well integrated than the next generation version. There was so much to take in, and after getting off the ride there was one more minor disappointing aspect of the upgrade, which was the lockers, as I mentioned before. The problem with the new locker system is that to get back to your belongings you have to walk through a narrow doorway into the station to collect your things, but at the same time new riders are putting their belongings away as well. So there's a lot of confusion and traffic, which feels kind of frantic and intense. After exiting the ride, I had a lot of thoughts about the experience. On one hand, I was impressed by the theming upgrades and touch-ups. I think they did a fantastic job with the dark ride section particularly, and the new screens were surprisingly well integrated as well. But the coaster experience itself was surprisingly underwhelming and somewhat disappointing. I think that's partly due to the fact that I had built it up so much in my head, but also because I didn't really know what to expect. I thought it would feel a lot more noticeably different given the way it was advertised, but also they didn't really reveal much about the coaster itself with their teasers. It seemed like the teasers mainly focused the theming and atmosphere, which were all great, but it seemed like there was still a few more surprises coming up throughout the rest of the ride. So when we got to the coaster section and found out that it was complete darkness, it was a bit of a letdown. But overall I was just happy to finally re-ride Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, and a couple of days later I also attended the content creator preview event, which was a lot of fun, where I got to hang out with some of the other awesome content creators from the Australian theme park community, and I got to meet some of the people who helped out with this video in person, which was awesome. And by complete fluke, I actually got to film a POV, which I didn't plan. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster opened the same day as the preview event, so we were lucky to get a few extra rides on it before the rest of the crowds joined the queue. And judging from the size of the queue, it seemed to be a massive hit. People flocked to line up hours to get on the new version. There were a few technical hiccups and interruptions, and not all of the effects were working, but finally Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster was back in the park, and it immediately had an enormous impact on the throughput and crowd management. It is, after all, an extremely iconic and popular attraction, so it's a great people eater. It improved the atmosphere, not just in the ride itself, but also throughout the park as a whole. The reactions to the ride were quite similar to my own. People were generally quite impressed with the theming and atmosphere and everything, but the coaster section was a big disappointment for a lot of people, especially the fact that it was in pitch black darkness. Which is ironic, because the one part of Next Gen that people actually were fans of was the disco lights and coaster section, and they'd sort of downgraded it from that, which was a bit of a surprise. Soon after the opening of Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster 3.0, the new stunt show, Spy Chase Stunt Show, opened at the park, which was another big hit and huge turnaround from Movie World's previous trajectory. And since the Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster reopened, they've done a really incredible job at bringing back the sense of magic and excitement to the park. There's genuinely a really great atmosphere there. They started offering a few more things like pass holder discounts, and bringing back Hooray for Hollywood for a second time in April. And although the opinions on Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster 3.0 were mixed, the change in trajectory for Movie World as a park has been really promising, and you get the impression that they're listening a lot more to what guests have to say. Maybe some of the complaints about the ride will be addressed, such as the coaster section. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But what's most heartening of all is seeing the park returning to the standards they're capable of, and doing justice to their rides and IPs. But most importantly, to the guests who visit the park and spend their money in the hopes of a memorable experience. During the time Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster was closed, a whole new generation of kids grew up and were old enough to actually ride the attraction for the first ever time. So it's amazing that this ride, after so long, is still creating new experiences and memories for future generations. And hopefully Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster will continue to be a pillar for the park, and many more guests can continue to create new memories and experiences into the future. that's the end of my retrospective on Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was an enormous project and took a lot of hard work, but it wouldn't be possible without the help from the incredible content creators who helped out and shared their opinions and memories. Thank you so much to everyone who helped. A huge thank you to Theme Park Ogo, Dane's Theme Park Life, Mitty Theme Parks, Review Time, Ejector Bear Time, Perth Theme Park Life, The Adventures of Theme Park Girl, Ilana Parkin, and Isaac Hay. And also special thanks to Coaster Studios for sharing your experience or lack of experience with the ride. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, a friendly comment, or subscribe for more, and stay tuned for hopefully more theme park history documentaries coming up in the future. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to Team Yum Yum for supporting my content. A big thank you to the members and sponsors. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.